I had that dream again, the one where I was wearing all red. The moon was so big and round in the night sky, but there were no stars. So strange that there wouldn't be any stars. Just inky black space, so dark that you could almost hear it whisper. I don't ever want to have that dream again.
My mother, she isn't quite herself today. Hello, everyone. This is Stone Gasman, and this is the newest episode 4 of 60 Minutes of Stone. Glad to be with you today for the Visited by Voices Network. And today we are going to be doing something a little different. Now, episode 2, if you remember, we talked about Psycho 2 in dedication to director Richard Franklin. And in our third episode, we talked about Psycho 3 for a bit in tribute to director Kat Shea. Well, as a segue, I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to talk about the other films and series in the Psycho franchise. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to start with 3 Blu-ray reviews. We're going to start with a review of Psycho 4, The Beginning, right there. And then we are going to do Psycho 1998, the remake directed by Gus Van Sant. And then we are going to talk about Bates Motel, the series from 2013 to 2017 that arrived on A&E, courtesy of Universal Television. And then finally, we're going to cap off this 60 Minutes of Stone with a Psycho franchise ranking, where I take everything from the Psycho series and talk about each one, and I have 9 slots, okay? 9 entries in the Psycho franchise ranking that I'll be talking about. And of course, this is also a perfect time to do this because also Maxine came out, which Ty West had a little tribute to the Psycho franchise by actually shooting on the Universal lot where the Bates Motel is actually standing. And there's a great shot of Kevin Bacon looking like Detective Arbogast in the silhouette in the front door of the Bates house. And but also Anthony Perkins' son, as of now, has a hit around the country with his serial killer thriller Long Legs, starring Nicolas Cage. So this is a perfect opportunity to go ahead, revisit the Psycho franchise as a whole, and do my personal ranking. And just to let you know, it is my own ranking. You may have disagreements. That's awesome. Please let me know in the comments what your ranking would be and what your favorites are and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, so first we are going to talk about Psycho 4, The Beginning. Directed by Mick Garris, written by Joseph Stefano, who had written the original from 1960. And it stars Anthony Perkins back again as Norman Bates, as well as Olivia Hussey as Norma Bates, and Henry Thomas as the younger version of Norma Bates. And in this, in Psycho 4, I think that Henry Thomas was about 20, I believe, but I think that Norman Bates in the Psycho 4 is supposed to be like 18, 19 years old. And it's basically to show how the hell he got so screwed up in the first place. Now, Psycho 4, I think, is kind of unique because it's actually a prequel sequel hybrid of sorts. Now, the story goes is that Joseph Stefano wasn't very happy with Psycho 2 and 3 for his own personal reasons, and he wanted to sort of bring Norman Bates back to how he had written the character back in 1960. Now, Anthony Perkins, who had directed Psycho 3, of course, wanted to direct Psycho 4. But Universal was pretty much like, nah, that's okay. I mean, because Psycho 3 was sadly a commercial failure. I mean, it has gotten some praise over time, but at the time it was pretty much a failure, both critically and commercially, which is kind of sad. And so, what Universal decided to do was release Psycho 4 as a made for cable movie, specifically for Showtime in November of 1990 when they did a Psycho retrospective hosted by Janet Leigh, who, of course, played Marion Crane in the original Psycho back in 1960. And this was very, very interesting. Now, when I first saw this movie, I guess my first question for Joseph Stefano, my one question to Joseph Stefano would have been, well, if you're trying to ignore Psycho 2 and 3, why the hell would you call it Psycho 4? Why not just call it Psycho the Beginning? Because I mean, as the subtitle suggests, this is sort of how it showcases the roots of how Norma Bates, was basically a rather toxic mother, and basically put Norman Bates through this maelstrom of psychological, a lot of psychological damage and everything, and what made Norman Bates essentially. And look, when I first saw the movie, I was very, very skeptical about it. And I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I was hoping to that first time around. However, due to Scream Factory's excellent Blu-ray here, which by the way, this is not a collector's edition like they did with Psycho 2 and 3, oddly enough. I mean, that's the thing. It's just Psycho 4 right there. But it does have a number of great special features, which we will go into as well. But my whole feeling on Psycho 4 has kind of changed or evolved, actually, as you could say, over the course of the years since I've seen it. And I've seen it about 4 times now. Now, what goes on in Psycho 4? Well, essentially, Norman Bates is, he's out of the insane asylum. Here again, it doesn't really acknowledge Psycho 2 and 3. However, there are little bits of information that are dropped in that I'm not going to give away. But at the same time, it does have a tenuous connection to the sequels, whether Joseph Stefano had intended those to be there or not. And he's basically he's living in this large house, somewhere away from the Bates Motel and everything, and he wants to, I guess you could say, purge his memories of matricide by calling into this radio station, and which they have a show about matricide, which is being hosted by CCH Pounder. And among the familiar faces are director John Landis, of all people. Now, director Mick Garris, he has a podcast, and he's been kind of instrumental in keeping all these horror directors in contact over time, which is pretty awesome. I regret to say I have not listened to his podcast yet, but or even watched Masters of Horror, but I do want to do that eventually down the road. And the thing is that with Psycho 4, what wins me over with this movie is largely due to the casting of Norma and Norman Bates. Now, Anthony Perkins, to be perfectly honest, I mean, he's only in about a third of the movie. And of course, this was shot at a time when, Anthony Perkins was rather ill. He had been diagnosed with HIV a few years before, but he's still Norman Bates. I mean, there's no question, and he does he does bring what he can, even though I do feel that it's kind of a half-hearted performance, because he was obviously not too happy about not being able to direct this one. And also, while there weren't any significant clashes between him and director Mick Garris, there were discussions. And, Mick Garris was determined to not let Psycho 4 devolve into camp, even though Psycho 2 and 3, you could argue, have camp elements. But at the same time, he wanted to go. The bottom line is Mick Garris wanted to go in a different direction and honor what Joseph Stefano wrote, and yet put his own stamp on the franchise. And the interesting thing about Psycho 2, 3, and 4 is that they were all made basically to honor Alfred Hitchcock in some way. Richard Franklin and Tom Holland, did Psycho 2 to honor Hitchcock. Anthony Perkins wanted to honor Hitchcock in his own way with Psycho 3. And then finally with Psycho 4, Joseph Stefano gets a chance to revisit this universe. And along with Mick Garris, they wanted to honor Hitchcock in their own way. And I actually think they succeed. Psycho 4 has, needless to say, a very, very mixed reputation. It didn't really make that big of a splash when it was released, on Showtime. And even though it was not released in theaters domestically, it was released in theaters internationally. So, and the thing is that here again, a few viewings and some context as to what exactly Stefano was doing, because he was, when he wrote the original film, he was heavily into Freud analysis, and at one point he wanted to cast his own psychiatrist. That very famous scene in the original Psycho, which many wanted to just take out, with the psychiatrist at the end explaining what exactly happened. I mean, here again, to a 1960s audiences, that scene is necessary. And I don't mind the scene personally, and I think it gives the actor who plays the psychiatrist a wonderful monologue and everything. Well, that psychiatrist is back in Psycho 4. He's actually interviewed in the radio station, and you could tell because the dialogue is pretty much exactly the same to what he was saying in 1960. Of course, he's a lot older now. And now, of course, the idea is that Norman Bates may murder again. And the weird thing about the sequel segments is that we're not near the Bates Motel. We don't go to the Bates Motel until the prequel flashbacks, which showcase Norma and Norman Bates and their unorthodox relationship, to say the least. And look, here's the thing. I fully admit that I am a Henry Thomas fan. I mean, I talked about Cloak and Dagger ad nauseum on my Richard Franklin episode. And, I've liked him in other things too, like Fire in the Sky and everything. And I'm hoping to meet him actually next month in Louisiana at GeekCon. But I mean, he was, if I'm going to be frank, I think that he was probably the perfect choice to play a young Norman Bates. And, Olivia Hussey, who played Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, of course, insanely beautiful woman. I mean, and she also starred in one of my favorite horror films of all time, which is Black Christmas. And we're talking top 3 here. I mean, Bob Clark's Black Christmas is, I think, a masterpiece of horror that it took actually a while for it to get that reputation, because in I'm not going to go into it, but there is a famous story where evidently it kind of more or less inspired John Carpenter to make Halloween after a conversation with Bob Clark at some event. I don't even remember now what exactly it was, but yeah, it might have influenced Halloween, simply because of the holiday horror aspect and everything. And look, I actually thoroughly enjoy Psycho 4 now. I think that it's very well shot. I think it's nicely acted by everyone. Anthony Perkins, he doesn't appear to be struggling, but at the same time, what we know now is that he was really struggling internally with his disease, very, very sadly. And I mean, like I said, I think that even though you can attack it all you want for being unnecessary or just not quite fitting into the Psycho universe, but I think it's a much better sequel than people give it credit for. And I applaud Mick Garris. I think he does an excellent job with Psycho 4 for the most part. I applaud the actors. And I think that, for a 96-minute Psycho sequel, it does, it contributes more to the franchise and to the original than some of the other entries that I'm going to be talking about here in a minute. But just real quick, if you want to pick up Psycho 4, like I said, Scream Factory put out this Blu-ray right here, and they give it, the video quality and the audio quality are excellent. And as you can see with the bonus features right there, I'll go ahead and put it up there. The audio commentary with director Mick Garris, actors Olivia Hussey and Henry Thomas, I'm going to be quite frank, is probably my favorite audio commentary on all the Psycho films. Okay, I am a hardcore Tom Holland fan, and I did love the Psycho 2 commentary, and I did like the Psycho 3 commentary with the screenwriter as well. But of all the commentaries that have been made for Psycho movies, this is my favorite. Mick Garris, he has a wonderful roundtable discussion with Olivia and Henry. They provide a lot of stories, a lot of context, and I even like how Olivia Hussey is honest in how she felt about the Psycho sequels in general. And here again, I do think the movie does fit into the franchise in its own way. And here again, along with the commentary, which here again you should definitely take a listen if you pick this up. We also have 13 minutes of behind the scenes footage, and also a cool look at the scoring of Psycho 4. And even though those are culled from older video sources, they're all worth checking out. And there's also a photo gallery, as well as a featurette which runs 30 minutes long, which is an interview with makeup expert Tony Gardner, who contributed to the movie in terms of the making of Mother and everything, and it has behind the scenes footage as well. So even though this is technically not a collector's edition, it is still, I think, an excellent, excellent release of Psycho 4 the beginning, and honestly, a little long overdue. I'm glad that Psycho 4, along with the other sequels 2 and 3, has this kind of red carpet package. And I do think that the movie earns it, even if it's not exactly a favorite among fans of the franchise. But anyway, that is Psycho 4 the beginning. I like I said, I've come around on it. I enjoy the movie, and it will be on my annual viewing when I do a Psycho marathon, to be perfectly honest. Now, unfortunately, what does not measure up to Psycho 4 the beginning, which is, wherever you want to put Psycho 4 in the ranking, I mean, I can't stress enough how much I think it's a classic compared to what Gus Van Sant gave us in 1998 with the Psycho remake. Yeah, check in, relax, take a shower. Yeah, I mean, back in 1998, I got to admit, I found that tagline rather amusing. Now, the movie itself, and I did see the movie in theaters in 1998, and I wasn't exactly too enthusiastic about it. I mean, once the word went around that Psycho was going to be remade by Universal, I think a lot of people, and I think appropriately, were seriously like, "What the fuck? What do you think you're doing here?" Well, look, I mean, sadly, Anthony Perkins passed away in 1992. He was only 60 years old, and so the chances of us having another Psycho movie, like a Psycho 5 or something, were pretty much gone. With Anthony Perkins sadly passing, the chances of us having another movie were pretty much non-existent at this point. So there was really nowhere else to go but do a Psycho remake. But the interesting thing about this movie is that Universal told Gus Van Sant for years, and Gus Van Sant had already become an established director with, Drugstore Cowboy, My Own Private Idaho, To Die For, which is a great, great thriller with Nicole Kidman, just got the Criterion treatment, as well as Good Will Hunting, which was a massive commercial and critical success. It won a couple of Oscars and everything. So, I mean, Gus Van Sant wanted to do a remake of Psycho for years, and Universal kept telling him no, 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 no. But then Good Will Hunting hit. It won acclaim. It won awards. It won the box office. And then finally, Universal said, "Okay, you can make your Psycho remake." And so this was a rather expensive movie, to make. I mean, I think the initial budget was something like 23 million, and I think it kind of ballooned, from there due to advertising costs and stuff like that. And okay, is it essentially the same movie? Yes and no. It is. They use the Joseph Stefano script. However, there are a few little changes that are sprinkled throughout to make it a little bit more modern. I mean, this is 1998 after all. But and I've never. This is, of course, there's an infamous bit where Vince Vaughn, playing Norman Bates, actually masturbates when he looks into the peephole and sees Marion Crane undressing. However you feel about that, Vince Vaughn on the commentary for Psycho uh, puts up an argument for it. And I think with this remake, the thing is that I don't think Gus Van Sant wanted to honor Alfred Hitchcock like with the sequels so much as create what he termed a conceptual art piece. In other words, he Andy Warholed the original Psycho. Which look, I will admit that there are fans of this movie out there. Okay, there are people that have come around on it and accepted it for what it is. And when I bought this Blu-ray, and believe me, I mean, I would not have picked up this Blu-ray if not for the fact it did have a nice amount of bonus features, as you can see right there. I would not have picked this up otherwise. But I wanted to give the people that worked on the movie a chance to convince me. I wanted them to give a chance to convince me, look, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe these performances weren't as bad as I initially thought. Maybe there is a justification for this remake. Personally, I never thought there was to begin with, because, I mean, look, when Psycho 1960 is still existing and it's still doing exceptionally well, why bother remaking it? Just, Danny Elfman, who loves the original, and he loves the music to the original, he told Gus Van Sant straight up, you're going to get crucified. You're going to get crucified, man, by everybody, not just critics, but historians and audiences. And yeah, Psycho 1998 was basically dismissed when it came out. It bombed horribly. The critics, tore into it like no tomorrow, and there weren't a lot. I mean, that's the thing. There was very, very little support for it, and I think personally, this is just my theory. I think, I mean, and look, on the commentary, Gus Van Sant explains that part of the reason why he did this, even though he also wanted to turn this into a conceptual art piece, he said that part of the reason he wanted to do this was because, well, the kids today, they're not watching black and white movies anymore. Now, I mean, that's the thing. I would have preferred, even though to some people it is absolutely sacrilege, is you might as well have just colorized the original. Personally, I would have preferred that than trying to make a whole new movie, because I think the biggest issue with Psycho 1998, above all else, I think they should have brought in another writer to modernize the script. In other words, there were a lot of things that were still, uh, let's just say, I mean, probably believable in 1960, whereas today they don't make a lot of sense. I mean, the perfect example is when Detective Arbogast shows up to the Bates Motel, investigating what happened to Marion Crane, and he when he pulls up, he actually goes over the passenger seat and out the passenger side door. Now, what exactly the reasons for this were, I'm not exactly sure. I would assume that Hitchcock just wanted to keep his camera stationary and just have him and Norman Bates all in one shot without him having to go all around the car, for convenient purposes, because that's like a waste of time and everything. But also, I mean, could it be due to just, safety and everything? Maybe, I'm not an auto expert, but to me, that really screamed as a dated 1960s action. Whereas in 1998, especially with the cars back then, which you could easily slide over if you wanted to just to get out of the passenger side. But in 1998, the majority of the cars are have two seats and the space in between. William H. Macy, who plays Arbogast in Psycho 1998, and he's not bad. He's not certainly not bad. I think the hat is a major distraction, and it actually affects his performance, to be perfectly honest. But when he crosses over to get out of the passenger side, not only does he hit the horn, but he also grunts, or moans as he's getting out. And Gus Van Sant makes him do it again when he pulls back up into the motel. And look, I just think that, this is a perfect example where we need to eliminate these dated aspects of the script and bring in somebody to modernize it and not make it as close to the original as possible. In other words, I'm saying, if you're going to remake Psycho, if you're going to remake a classic masterpiece like Psycho, look, give it its own identity, give it its own vision and perspective. And Gus Van Sant, I think his biggest fault is that he relies too much on the original. I think he just relies way too much on the original. And there's a lot of tidbits that I just think are absolutely nonsensical. Chiefly among them, when Lila, Marion's sister, in the remakes, when they're about to go see the sheriff, she says, "Okay, let me go get my Walkman." In the original, Vera Miles says, "I need to get my jacket." Now you got to remember, this is December. Yes, it's Arizona, but it's December. It's probably cold outside. The coat line would have worked in 1998 perfectly fine. But no, to me, that sounded like almost like a desperate attempt to reach out to a youth audience. It's like, okay, let me get my Walkman. It's so awkward and so inane that, I mean, by that time, I had lost all hope for the remake. All right. Now, the one improvement in the casting department, or at least performance wise in the casting of the remake, I would actually give to Viggo Mortensen as Sam Loomis. I mean, in the original, forgive me, his name doesn't. John Gavin, yeah, John Gavin. I mean, he's I forget what Hitchcock's actual quote was for John Gavin, but he basically said that he's not much of an actor, but he does look handsome. He's a very handsome man. And of course, when he has to have his shirt off and making love to Marion Crane in the beginning, that's really almost all that matters. In the remake, I think Viggo Mortensen, gives the much better performance. I mean, it's a margin, it's a small margin. What ruins a lot of the performances here, I think, is actually the wardrobe. Now, I mean, one of the famous aspects of the original Psycho is, like I said, Marion Crane wearing the black and white bras to symbolize how she's like, becoming a criminal. In the remake, which is in color, obviously, the colors don't really make any sense because, okay, she wears a green bra and then she wears an orange bra. To me, a lot of the costumes in the remake came off as just tacky, very, very, very tacky. I don't know the logic behind that. And on the remake, they defend the costumes as well because they wanted to give them a timeless quality. Oh no, 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 no. There is nothing timeless about any of the costumes in the remake at all. I mean, they're gaudy and tacky, and they just, they look like they came out of a Goodwill bin. Okay, I'm just being perfectly honest here. I mean, just, the costumes are a major, major letdown, especially if you're going to take advantage of the colorization of the movie. But I mean, there's so many things in the remake that I think just, that are just wrong. And this is just me personally. Now, Gus Van Sant is a great director. He's an awesome director. He's directed many films since then. I mean, in fact, I would scarce to say he's hardly made a bad movie. Psycho being one of the rare ones, and of course, Roger Ebert of all people actually compared it to Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, which was this disastrous Tom Robbins adaptation. Up until Psycho, that was Gus Van Sant's one misstep. And he's had very few missteps since then. I mean, he made Elephant, he made Milk. He's made many, many other good films, and he is a really, really good director. I have nothing but respect for the man. But even as a conceptual art piece, I can't get behind the remake of Psycho. I just can't do it. Now, I will say, and look, I mean, Anne Heche, I think that she was cast more because of the fact that she had short hair, like like Janet Leigh had back in 1960, and she just had, she had a Janet Leigh physical resemblance. I think that's why she was cast. Now, what happened to her was absolutely tragic, and I would even dare say conspiratorial in some aspects. I'm not going to go into that. And it is really sad because, I mean, since then, she's done really good work. There were moments throughout the commentary because she had seen the original literally right before they started shooting. So she wasn't even completely familiar with the original. Now, in one way, that could be a benefit. But unfortunately, I think due to her inexperience and also due to the fact that she wasn't in tune with the original and was aware of its history, I think that's what kind of affected it. Because a lot of the reaction shots that she has in this movie, particularly to Norman Bates, are just off. I mean, they just don't work for me at all. I mean, here again, bless her heart, how she died was horrible, but her revisiting the Psycho remake didn't convince me that she was the right person in this role. And then you have Vince Vaughn. Vince Vaughn was basically a jock type. You don't cast a jock type in the role of Norman Bates. It's just, the casting was all wrong. Now, I will give Vince Vaughn this, though. I think he mentioned on the commentary, and I think a few other places, that he was unsure of himself for like the first few days of shooting. Like he wasn't, I mean, of course he felt a little intimidated, obviously, taking on this role. And I don't think that he got into a groove with the Norman Bates character until later in the film. And I do think, to give him credit, I do think that his performance improves over time. I think it does improve over time. And in the second half, I think he's much better in the second half of the movie than he is in the first half. All right. And then, of course, Julianne Moore, great actress. I don't think that she improves upon Vera Miles in any way. And, the whole thing is just, it just kind of shakes my head. It shakes my head as to what exactly they were thinking. But here again, as the bonus features stipulate, there's some people that have actually come around on the Psycho remake. And I do believe that it has its fair share of fans now. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the bonus features real quick, because also, to be quite frank, I do think that the bonus features leave a lot to be desired. And here again, they don't convince me that this movie should ever have been made. Um, but as you can see right there, okay, there are the bonus features right there. There is an audio commentary with Gus Van Sant, Anne Heche, and Vince Vaughn, which was done at the time of when the movie was about to go into theatrical release. And look, Gus Van Sant, to give him credit, he does give his justifications as to why he did it. And Vince Vaughn and Anne Heche both defend the film, knowing that there was going to be backlash. I think they all knew. Honestly, I think that Gus Van Sant knew during the making of the movie that he was going to be thrown up against a wall and have arrows slung at him. I I know that he probably felt that, and but he doesn't. I don't think he regrets making the movie. And you know what? He shouldn't have to. You know, I just and here again, so the commentary unfortunately didn't convince me, but there's also a brand new commentary recorded for this Blu-ray by Rob Galuzzo, who did a documentary called The Psycho Legacy, which we'll talk about in a minute, and also the editor of the film, Amy Duddleston, uh, joins in on the commentary as well. And look, at the end of the commentary, Amy Duddleston defends the movie, and she says, you know, she's proud of her work. Here again, she should feel that way. You know, and that's the thing. The movie is actually about 5 or 6 minutes shorter, and I think that you know they wanted to speed things up a bit. And look, to be fair, like I will say one positive about the Psycho remake. I actually do like the new title sequence, and I also like the helicopter shot, which Hitchcock wanted to do in 1960 as we go into the hotel room. But then again, I also think, like, why not also include the Joseph Stefano deleted scene in the script of Lila and Sam Loomis talking about how, you know, they had lost somebody that they loved in the hardware store? That would have given their characters a little bit more to munch on. And also, I mean, I think it would have helped us care about them a little bit more because the transition, even in the original, from Marion Crane and Norman Bates to Lila and Sam is a tad jarring because and like Stefano said, it's very difficult to write to have us care about these new characters who we were not. I mean, yes, we were introduced to Sam, but we were now finally being introduced to Lila when her sister goes missing. So, but you could have done that. You could have included that scene as well. And then you could have taken out the psychiatrist scene because by 1998 it was completely unnecessary. And that's the thing is that and they don't up the ante on the gore, which part of me was okay with because I mean Anne Heche of all people in the commentary actually defends that because you know one thing that she was right about is that this is a psychological thriller and not a slasher gore fest. Uh, you know, but I mean, still, even still, I do think that, like I said, they depended way too much on the original. I think they should have brought in another writer to modernize it, to make it more 1998. And I think that they should have tweaked other things that wouldn't have uh, made people question. Because that's the thing. All throughout the movie, I just kept asking questions. Why are you doing this? Why did you do that? Um, and because of that, I couldn't enjoy the movie as its own thing. And that's where I think where the filmmakers did a serious misstep in remaking the movie. Now, there's also a 30-minute featurette called Psychopath, The Making of Psycho, where Gus Van Sant actually compares the filmmaking process during the making of the movie to Scientology. I'm not going to go there. I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. And there's also some trailers and a stills gallery. So, I mean, look, I got one more thing to say during the ranking. I will get to that when we get to that. But look, I just don't feel like there was enough justification, especially in 1998, to go this route and do a remake of Psycho in this particular fashion. It has its fans. I respect those fans. And like I said, it's not a complete disaster. there are things about the remake I actually do like. They're very minor, but there are aspects in there. And look, Vince Vaughn, look, I know that, I think he was attacked a bit too harshly. I mean, and he has proven since then to become a great dramatic actor, with movies like Hacksaw Ridge and everything. So, not a complete disaster, but at the same time, I will probably never watch Psycho 1998 again. It's probably just not going to happen. I mean, I gave it a shot. I gave it a shot. I gave everybody a chance to speak their minds, say what they had to say. But unfortunately, it didn't get there. So now, Psycho 1998, of course, was a massive disaster, and it seemed like okay that the franchise was essentially dead at that point. That is until 2013 when we got the Bates Motel television series. And let me tell you, when the first season came out on Blu-ray, I did not watch it on cable because I didn't have cable, so I wasn't able to watch it. And me, when it comes to TV shows, I don't like to wait every single week to watch a new episode. I just don't have the patience for that. I would rather just binge watch the damn thing all the way through. Now, when the first season came out on DVD and Blu-ray, I watched it and I actually reviewed it for a newspaper. And I thought, wow, this is the most awesome television series that I've seen in quite some time. I mean, I never bothered. Admittedly, my TV knowledge is very low. I mean, I never watched Sopranos or Sex and the City. I saw Sex and the City later, but I mean, like, I don't watch a lot of television. Now, but of course, what drew me to this is because, look, Psycho is one of my favorite franchises. It probably is my favorite horror franchise, period, and that's why I think it's a joy to be able to do this. But I mean, this series, I mean, here again, perfectly cast. Freddie Highmore as Norman Bates. He was in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is one of the worst remakes I've ever seen, to be perfectly honest. Even if you want to try to defend it as a new adaptation of the Roald Dahl book. I, but the only great thing about that movie was Freddie Highmore. He made a great Charlie Bucket. And I'm not going to say anything more about that one, but no, and like I said, he also makes for the perfect Norman Bates. He really does. And I'm not saying that he improves upon Henry Thomas, and I'm not saying that Vera Farmiga improves upon Olivia Hussey. Like I said, two different time periods. I think that when Psycho 4 came out, those were the right actors for those roles. And for the series, Freddie Highmore and Vera Farmiga were just the right actors to play these two iconic roles. And the best way I mean, if there's any comparison I'd like to make, it would probably for the Bates Motel for Psycho 4 the beginning and the Bates Motel series would be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it came out as a movie in 1992. It didn't do well, but it has now a cult audience. But it was vastly improved upon with the television series that came out in the late 90s with Sarah Michelle Gellar and Allison Hannigan. And that show lasted 7 seasons. It probably lasted 2 seasons more than it should have because apparently Buffy dies at the end of season 5. Sorry, spoilers, but I have to say that the last 2 seasons of Buffy were a massive letdown. It should have stopped at season 5. Bates Motel, there are 5 seasons. Each season has approximately 10 episodes. And let me say, from the first episode, from the first sequence of the first episode, I was so on board. I mean, the first season is great, but it's also one of those things where with each subsequent season, it just gets better and better and better. And it is a ride. Whether you're intimately familiar with the Psycho franchise or not, this is a ride. And I loved every minute of it. Now, it is a adaptation of both the Robert Bloch novel and the Hitchcock movie. But what makes this different is that it's actually set in Oregon, not Arizona as it was before. And like Psycho 1998, it attempts to modernize everything, but it does so without depending upon the original sources. And that's where I think this film, I mean, excuse me, where this series excels and ultimately becomes something very, very special. And, you know, it won Saturn Awards, it won People's Choice Awards, and it lasted 5 years, 5 seasons, and just all the characters. I mean, I love Max Theroux as Dylan, who is Norman's brother, who is kind of estranged from Norma and Norman for reasons I will not go into. My favorite character is probably Emma Ducody, who is played by Olivia Cook, and of course she needs breathing support, and her character goes through a lot of twists and turns, and she actually has a huge crush on Norman early on. Here again, I don't want to give too much away, but and then Nestor Carbonell, who is also on the morning show with Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston. He's great as Sheriff Alex Romero, and it's just, and I also love Kenny Johnson as Caleb Calhoun, who figures in over the course of the series as well. Um, and I mean, that's the thing, is that this series, I think, first of all, I think the greatest achievement that this series does is that it actually, I think, closes the Psycho franchise in the most perfect way possible. I mean, here again, the movies had run their course. The movies had completely run their course. And as a series, it's more concerned about showcasing the toxic developing relationship between Norma and Norman. And I think it does so believably. I think it does so beautifully. Here again, love all the characters. I love the twists and turns, and man, there are plenty. There is murder, there is mayhem, there are knives, there is Norman dressing up as his mother. It's spectacular, and most of all, unpredictable. You may think will know what exactly will happen based on what you saw before. Don't think that way, because the series actually, here again, unlike the Psycho remake, it creates its own identity, and it goes in completely different direction, sort of like what Psycho 2 and Psycho 3 do. But of course, with those all had a continuity to them with Anthony Perkins as Norman. But no, Bates Motel, the series, and I've seen it twice in full now. I've seen it twice in full now. I mean, you could probably get through all the episodes in a couple weeks. It won't take too long if you were going to binge watch all of them. But at the same time, I mean, like I said, everything about this show I just adore. I mean, everything from the photography to all the characters, all the dilemmas they have to go through, the drama that actually comes about as things, the tension just ramps and ramps and ramps up from the very beginning. I love the organ setting. Absolutely adore that. I mean, I can't stress enough how much I love the Bates Motel series. It's just, and I don't want to, like, here again, I don't want to go into too much detail. Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention real quick that Emma Ducody, who's played by Olivia Cook, she suffers from cystic fibrosis, so she has trouble breathing and everything. And also, what was the other character that I wanted to mention here real quick? Chick Hogan. Yeah, Chick Hogan, played by Ryan Hurst. That is a character I will never, ever forget. He's introduced in season 3 and everything. And among the other supporting actors, you have Andrew Howard as Emma's father, Will, who of course is very protective of his daughter. You also have it's the 25th anniversary of the Blair Witch Project, so I might as well mention that Joshua Leonard is also in this film, in this series as James Finnegan, who gets to know Norma later on in season 3 and everything. And yeah, so I think that's all I really want to give away. When it does get to season 5. I'm not going to give away the casting choices, but I will say that it does get as close to the original Psycho as possible without imitating it. Because here again, it goes in completely different directions. They're all unpredictable. They're all compelling. And honestly, I can't wait to watch the series again. I mean, I love the show that much. I mean, I don't think I'm in the minority here because, like I said, audience loved it. The critics, by the way, the first season has like an 84% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And then they just go higher and higher. Season 3 has 95, and season 4 and 5 have 100% approval ratings. 100%. Like I said, if you haven't checked out Bates Motel yet, do so. Please do so. Now, as far as the Blu-ray set here, which is courtesy of Universal, they did a wonderful, wonderful job with this set. I mean, as you can see right there, there's 5 Blu-rays housed. The only complaint I have about this Blu-ray set is that there are some of the Blu-rays, not all of them, but you do have to skip through a lot of advertisements and some other junk when you just want to get straight to the menu and play all the episodes. But there is a play all function. Like I said, there's 2 discs to every season. There's a play all function. Watch them in 5 episode increments. That's probably my recommendation. If you were going to approach this, watch it in 5 episode increments, take a break, and then watch the next 5 episodes when you get a chance. So, I can't recommend the Bates Motel series highly enough. And here again, Vera Farmiga. I absolutely fell in love with her as Norma Bates. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a Olivia Hussey fan too. But Vera Farmiga, I mean, she was in The Departed, the Martin Scorsese film, which won Best Picture. She is just transcendent as Norma Bates. And Freddie Highmore, the changes that he goes through, all of them psychological. I mean, as his character has to deal with repeated blackouts and being, I guess you could say, in certain situations where murders happen and everything, and we don't know, and everybody is speculating, well, wait a minute, did he have something to do with it? Did he not have something to do with it? It's wonderful. Enjoy the ride. Just, check it out, enjoy the ride. You're going to have so much fun with it. Now, okay, so we're 52 minutes in. Let's go ahead and knock out this Psycho franchise ranking real quick. And I'm not going to have too much to say with each entry, but like I said, we got 9 entries for the Psycho ranking here. At the bottom, at the very, very bottom, and I didn't even mention it up until now, and there's a reason for that, is there was actually a Bates Motel made-for-television movie made back in 1987, written and directed by Richard Rothstein, who had also written Death Valley, a slasher film from 1982. And he's also a writer for all the Universal Soldier movies, that franchise that started out with Dolph Lundgren. I've honestly never seen any of them. I heard that the original does have a cult audience unto itself. But this is the one entry in the entire franchise that I can safely say it is total crap. We barely see Norman Bates. Norman Bates is played by an actor named Kurt Paul, and all we really see of him is he's being taken out of the courthouse and he comes down some steps. Now, he did do stunts on Psycho 2 as well as Psycho 3, and he played Raymond Lynette in Psycho 4: The Beginning. So he does have a much bigger connection to to the franchise. In fact, I'm pretty certain he's probably appeared in more Psycho entries than anybody else. But we see him only very, very briefly because the hotel is basically inherited by Bud Cort. Now, Bud Cort he stars in one of my three favorite movies of all time, which is Harold and Maude, the Hal Ashby masterpiece from 1971, where he plays a rich kid that has suicidal inclinations, but he's more about trying to get his mother's attention. Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the Cat Stevens songs, and he meets an elderly woman at a funeral. He likes to go to funerals, and he meets this elderly woman played by Ruth Gordon, who is wonderful. And Ruth Gordon basically shows him what he's missing out on life. It's one of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion. And if you haven't seen it yet, put it on your watch list immediately. In fact, I got to thank Keith Gordon, who was in films like Dressed to Kill and Christine, for recommending it one time many, many years ago. And I was able to tell him personally, look, I want you to know, Mr. Gordon, it's because of you that Harold and Maude is now one of my top 3 movies of all time. So bless you, Keith Gordon. but look, Bud Cort, unfortunately, his career stalled very early on after this, and the whole Keith Gordon connection is that Bud Cort was in Keith Gordon's directorial debut of The Chocolate War in 1998, based on the controversial bestseller. And so Bud Cort is just miscast. Lori Petty, who I've loved in films like Point Break, she's miscast. And also, it has a very early performance by Jason Bateman as well as Robert Picardo. The only actor that I think is good in it, however, is Carrie Keane. She's a Canadian actress. And the whole idea behind this Bates Motel television movie is that the Bates Motel is haunted. And so it was supposed to be a segue into a weekly series where we would see all the psycho guests being haunted by the ghosts of Bates Motel. It is sloppy. It is stupid. There are things in it that make zero sense. And on top of all that, I mean, just the way it discards the character of Norman Bates and tries to do this whole new thing with just the motel. I mean, that's the thing. Psycho 4, whatever you want to say about Psycho 4, it is 1,000 times better than Bates Motel. 1,000 times better. The movie, which came out in '87 between Psycho 3 and 4. Unless you are a hardcore Psycho completist, don't bother. And yes, Universal, to give them credit, they did put out the Bates Motel TV movie on a Vault Series DVD. Unless you're the most hardcore of completists, there's no reason to bother. There's no reason to bother. And I would actually say the same thing for entry number 8 on my ranking, which is the Psycho 1998 remake. And the only thing I'm going to say with Psycho 1998 being in the number 8 slot of my ranking, the only thing I'm going to say, if you are a Psycho completist, pick up this Blu-ray. I mean, look, I give Shout Factory credit for including all the bonus material. But like I said, that's really the only people that should pick this up is just to basically have it on the wall next to everything else. Here again, I did not buy the Bates Motel TV movie. I opted for this because it does have extras. And look, to be fair, the extras are interesting, but they just never convinced me that this is a movie that deserves a second look. But say what you will. I'm probably never going to play this Blu-ray disc again, just for the record. Number 6. Now, number 6 on my Psycho ranking is something that I have to talk about. And that is, in fact, the 2012 movie Hitchcock, starring Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren as his wife, Alma. And basically, this is a 98-minute movie which showed a dramatization about the making of Psycho. As we go behind the scenes, and we basically have these A-list stars. Like, oh my God, just look at this cast. Look at that cast. Scarlett Johansson plays Janet Leigh. Toni Collette plays Peggy Robinson, Alfred Hitchcock's secretary, and even Jessica Biel, who is an actress I've never cared before, she's really good as Vera Miles. And James Darcy plays Anthony Perkins. And let me put it this way. I saw this originally when it came out in 2012. I was disappointed with it. I don't remember exactly why I was disappointed with it until I picked up this Blu-ray and I checked it out again. And it's based on Stephen Rebello's book about the making of Psycho, which came out the same year as Psycho 4 in 1990. I can't help but think that you would probably get more out of that book and also more out of the Making of Psycho documentary, which is on copies of the original film as a bonus feature. I can't help you would get much more out of those than you would this dramatization. Because, look, Anthony Hopkins, one of the great actors, he was Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, won Best Actor for Silence of the Lambs, which, of course, that character is also inspired by Ed Gein, as was Norman Bates, and, of course, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Ed Gein has inspired a lot of our movie villains, obviously. And look, I think that for a lot of these actors, that these roles were non-challenging. They were too easy. But what's also frustrating is that we see many of them so little. I mean, Ralph Macchio, who of course is back as Daniel LaRusso in the Cobra Kai series, which I actually love as much as Bates Motel. He has one scene. He has one scene as Joseph Stefano. Um, you know, uh, what are the other actors in here? I mean, Toni Collette, we barely see her as Peggy Robertson. And we spend way too much time for a movie that purports to be about the relationship between Alma Reveal and Hitchcock himself, which is an important one. A lot of times we see them apart. And we also see Alma hanging out with a screenwriter played by Danny Houston, who we have zero interest in. I mean, bring us back to the Paramount backlots as Psycho is being shot, because I don't want to see her hang out with the screenwriter, okay? I just don't. Um, so, yeah, I think that Hitchcock, I think it met well. I think you will have some fun with it, but it's also a massive letdown. And I think, one more thing I wanted to mention, and by the way, this is number 7 on my ranking. I think I said number 6 before. No, this is number 7. Bates Motel is number 9, TV movie number 9. Psycho 98 is my 8th. This is number 7. I think the only actor, from what I understand, the only actor that did not consent to be interviewed for Stephen Rebello's book was the actor who played Arbogast. And I think the reasoning behind that was because he didn't want to be known just for one film. And that's kind of my problem with Hitchcock, is why not, if you're so concerned about showcasing the relationship of Alfred and Alma, why not just call it Alfred and Alma and not focus exclusively on Psycho? Make Psycho the climax of the movie, okay? I think it's kind of a missed opportunity, because, we could have started out when they were making Rear Window, and we would have gone through like The Trouble with Harry and Vertigo and North by Northwest, and we could have concluded with The Birds, showcasing the most famous of all of Hitchcock's movies. Yes, I know Psycho changed horror history. Yes, I know it is the most well-known and popular of all of Hitch's films. But here again, I do think that this film would have benefited more by expanding the scope of Hitchcock's history and, of course, his relationship with Alma, which I think is very, very important. And I'm glad that, Helen Mirren is great. Don't get me wrong. I just think that there's a moment in the film where Hitchcock tells his wife that Psycho is stillborn, that it basically, it basically needs her touch to be a success, which is true. A lot of times, the films were a success based on what she contributed. And I felt like the same way about the movie Hitchcock. It's stillborn. It doesn't have, I don't think that it just has enough. Uh, and here again, I mean, I, in conclusion, I just think you would get more out of the book, Rebello's book, as well as the documentary of the making of Psycho on the original Blu-rays. I think you would get more out of that than this movie. But I will say the bonus features are very, very good. There's a commentary with Stephen Rebello, the author of the book, as well as the director. Um, his name is Sasha Gervasi. And as you can see, there's a number of cool featurettes here. A lot of them are like 5-6 minutes. But I mean, they're all great. They're all very good, and they're all worth swimming through once. I mean, there's deleted scenes, obsessed with Hitchcock, becoming the master from Hopkins to Hitchcock, cell phone PSA. That was really cool. Sasha Gervasi's behind the scenes cell phone footage, the story, the cast, the Danny Elfman. Yeah, Danny Elfman came back from Psycho 98 to score this one. And here again, I felt super let down by this movie. I mean, admittedly, I wanted more from Hitchcock and Alma as collaborators and less of them being separated and Hitchcock and Psycho being this somewhat troubled production that needed Alma so badly. So, I mean, your mileage may vary with Hitchcock. I mean, check it out. If you here again, like Psycho 98, if you want to be a completionist, definitely pick up this Blu-ray. And this movie came out from Fox Searchlight. That was one other thing. One other thing that bothered me was that, sort of like with Hollywoodland, with regards to the Adventures of Superman, we don't see Psycho being played in the theater, but we hear it, and we can tell that it's just a recreation. I mean, anybody that's seen Psycho more than once will be able to tell. Yeah, they're not watching Hitchcock. They're watching they're not watching Psycho. They're watching an imitation of Psycho, a recreation. And to be quite frank, despite the superb cast, it was a letdown. So that's number 7 on my Psycho ranking. Number 6, real quick, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it, is a documentary called The Psycho Legacy, which of course was made by Rob Galuzzo, who I mentioned did the commentary for Psycho 98. Now, the irony of that is that The Psycho Legacy, which came out, I believe, in 2006, has, it's about 97 minutes, dozens of interviews, talking heads galore, and it mostly focuses on Psycho 2, 3, and 4. It showcases basically the first 4 films, and it ignores the remake, and it also ignores the Bates Motel television movie. I mean, the series hadn't come out yet. I think the irony is that, I think that Rob Galuzzo, I don't know if he declined to reach out to Richard Rothstein and those that made the TV movie as well as the remake. I don't know if he just decided not to reach out to them to have them interviewed, or if he just wanted to avoid, um, you know, if he wanted to avoid bringing in outside opinions on it. I mean, because nobody mentions it. Nobody mentions the remake, and nobody mentions the Bates Motel TV movie. And I think that's kind of a letdown, because I kind of wish it had showcased the entire franchise up until that point. Even if the opinions were negative, I still would have liked, say, Ryan Turek's opinion on the Psycho remake. I still would have liked, anybody else that wasn't affiliated with that remake or the TV movie to say, no, I mean, what do you think of these entries, honestly? And look, and there's 2 discs on the Psycho Legacy documentary. There's a bunch of stuff on the second disc, a lot of great interviews. There's a whole feature length. Well, no, there's a whole longer interview with Tom Holland. There's Dean Cundy, who shot Psycho 2, and I talked about this previously on my second episode, but there's a lot of stuff that makes up this documentary package. The thing is, it's not something I'm going to return to every so often. Just because once you swim through everything, you're kind of exhausted at the end of it all. And I don't feel the need to actually watch all of it again. But look, I do applaud Rob Galuzzo. I think that it was amazing who he was able to get to talk and everything. Here again, not too many complaints about it. You should all check it out. See it only once. It's only available on DVD, courtesy of Shout Factory. I mean, definitely check it out. Now, okay, so now we are at number five, and number five is, of course, going to be Psycho for the Beginning. I've already said my piece on that. That is number five on my Psycho ranking. Number four is Psycho 3. Like I said, it's a guilty pleasure. I love it. Like what Anthony Perkins did with it. Here again, the one complaint I have is that I do think that his um, uh, determination to become a director kind of took away from his performance, his actual performance as Norman Bates. But I love Kat Shea's role in the movie, as I talked about previously in the last episode. There's a lot of things about, and Jeff Fahey with his guitar and everything. There are things about Psycho 3 I can't help but love. And it also has a nice continuity with Psycho 2. I mean, whatever you may think about Psycho 3, I do get a kick out of it. Now we come to the top three, okay? Now, after doing a lot of thinking, now the top three I would almost say are all basically equal. I'm going to put in the number three spot. And here again, this is my ranking, but I would put in the number three spot the Alfred Hitchcock original. Let me just say, and I'm going to make this very brief because I know we're already over 60 minutes here, but I'm going to make this very brief. I've seen it. I've seen the original Psycho a billion times at this point. It is a classic film. There's nothing that I will say that's going to take away from that. And of course, I'm not trying to take anything away from it. If you've never seen it, make it the number one priority to see next. Especially to be introduced to this franchise, which I personally love. There's a steelbook right there. Yeah, and this is the uncut version, which is only has a few extra shots. And it has the psycho making of Psycho documentary by Laurent Bouzereau and some many other features like newsreel footage, a breakdown of the shower scene and all that. I think it's a classic film. It's a landmark film. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I almost don't care about the minimal amount of flaws in it. And there are tiny things throughout that kind of bother me. I'm not even going to go into them because I don't. Here again, this is long enough as it is. But I mean, I honestly feel that I have gotten as much out of the original Psycho as I will probably ever get. I will still watch it many more times. And like I said, I do think that I don't think it's a perfect movie. And I also don't think it's even the best film of 1960. That to me will always be Billy Wilder's The Apartment, which I do think is a rare, perfect movie in my opinion. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, so Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock original, is going to be number three on my my ranking. Number two is going to be the Bates Motel series, which here again, if you haven't dived into it yet, please do so. And then finally, number one on my franchise ranking is going to be Richard Franklin's Psycho 2, which, like the Bates Motel series, I think does the impossible, where it's a sequel that not only matches the original, but I think improves on it in certain ways. I think it has Anthony Perkins' best performance as Norman Bates, honestly. And I also love Vera Miles in Psycho 2, much more than the original. I think that she's given much more to do. She's given a lot more character stuff to play around with. And like I said, I also love Meg Tilly in the movie. And the bonus features, like I said, here are great. There's an interview with Tom Holland, and also vintage video and audio interviews with Perkins, Miles, and director Franklin, many other people. Psycho 2 is my personal favorite entry in the entire Psycho franchise. So yeah, number one on my Psycho franchise is Psycho 2. So one last time. Number 9 is Bates Motel, the TV movie from 1987. Number 8 is the Psycho 1998 remake directed by Gus Van Sant. Number 7 is Hitchcock from 2012 with Anthony Hopkins. Number 6 is the Psycho Legacy documentary by Rob Galuzzo. Number 5 is Psycho 4 The Beginning. Number 4 is Psycho 3, directed by Anthony Perkins. Number 3 is Alfred Hitchcock's original Psycho from 1960. And number 2 is the Bates Motel television series. And then finally, number 1 is Psycho 2. So that is it for this episode of 60 Minutes of Stone. Forgive me, it's actually now 75 Minutes of Stone. But now for my next episode, for episode 5, I think this is actually going to be a perfect segue from the Psycho franchise. We are going to look at the directorial career of Anthony Perkins' son, Osgood Perkins, who, like I said, just had this massive hit over the weekend with Longlegs, which is awesome. But I'm also going to look at the other films that he directed, including The Black Coat's Daughter from 2015, I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House from 2016, Gretel and Hansel from 2020, and of course Longlegs, which just came out this weekend. And we'll also look briefly at his acting career before he became a director. So next weekend, my next episode is going to be an Oz Perkins directorial retrospective. Thank you for joining me for this massive episode looking at the Psycho franchise as well as my Psycho ranking. On behalf of Region Free and the Visited by Voices Network, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. And if you're a horror fan, check out Longlegs, and if you're a Psycho fan, check out the Bates Motel television series. You will not regret it. Thank you very much. You all have a great one.